Think you can get away?
Burn!
Hey everyone, this is Zoraz, not Casuals. Today I'm going to talk about one of the best support hero in Genshin Impact, Venti. It is probably one of the characters that most people are looking at right now because he is available in the special Wish bundle. He is a very important part of the current meta. Now, a lot of people will say that you can definitely play Venti as a DPS as well, and he can definitely be a support DPS type of character, but his role and his toolkit are built for supporting. Now, I'm going to go over his abilities, his talents, his constellation, as well as his artifact build and his weapon. And I'm going to talk about which stat priority is better on him and how to actually play him and bring him into your Abyss team in order to carry your team to victory. So first things first, on Venti, obviously, he has quite a few abilities that are very, very meaningful. Now, the first ability is obviously going to be just auto attacks with a shot of bow, and you can aim shot and do some anemo damage. Now, this is pretty standard for archers. You can see all the statistics here. It does quite a good amount of damage when it's fully charged, and his auto normal damage attack is actually not that bad, but he is definitely not built around doing auto attacks because none of his kits really boost that, as opposed to someone like Fischl, which has a kit that not only boosts normal attacks but also constellations that boost it. Now, going into the abilities, the first ability, the Skyward Sonnet, which is basically the E on the PC, is a very, very useful ability for both damaging and for helping you travel in the world. Now, this ability can be used by either tapping the button once to summon a wind domain at enemy's location, so it kind of auto-targets the nearest enemy and does a big AoE anemo damage swirl effect and basically launches them into the air for a few seconds. Now, this doesn't work on giant monsters, but any small monsters will be launched into the air and give you some time to basically launch other abilities and kill them. Now, if you hold that ability, you will actually launch yourself into the air while also doing damage to anyone around you. Now, to demonstrate, you will see here that if I press E once, I just basically summon a wind tunnel here, and anybody who was in there would be taking damage and be launched into the air. Now, if I hold the ability, you'll see that I'm going to get launched into the air, and then I can basically fly around for a little bit, and this tunnel stays there for quite a long time. So this is absolutely meaningful and useful for both traveling in the world and finding anemos in the air, but also if you want to just do this, you can basically go up and then do charge attack down. You can use your other characters and then just do over and over and use that tunnel to just basically give yourself some plunge AoE attacks. Now, for this ability, the press damage is actually 345% your attack stat. So that's actually a very, very high bursty. If you're building Venti as a support with high attack, you will do a lot of damage with this. The press cooldown is also 6 seconds, so this is a very low ability cooldown. You can cast this all the time. And you'll see that the hold damage actually does even more damage. So if you're holding it, every mob around you is going to take 475% of your attack as damage, and this is actually a very, very bursty ability, which has a bit longer cooldown in that situation. Now, if we go into the ult, which is the biggest ability that Venti has, because it is really what carries Venti into having a very good spot in the tier list, he basically launches an arrow that will basically create a black hole, and it will pull every single monsters around into that hole. Now, the small monsters will be in the air and will be completely unable to attack, and the big monsters will be kind of like slowed down and pulled towards it. Now, the really, really big kicker here for this ability is that if Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Electro comes into contact with that giant swirl, tornado, whatever, it will basically deal additional damage of that type on top of basically doing a swirl effect. So everything you cast into there will basically have a double damage effect where you're going to do Hydro and Swirl or Pyro and Swirl and so on. So it's going to create a huge vacuum of damage. It's AoE, it's insane damage. It also CCs every monsters around so that they can't attack you while they're stuck in there. And it has a very low cooldown. It's actually an incredible attack. You'll see that it does some good amount of damage. This is based on your attack skill, but you see the duration is 8 seconds and the cooldown is 15 seconds, which is very, very low. The energy cost of 60 is also very low, so you're going to be able to cast this basically every 15 seconds, which is why it is so meaningful. Now, to demonstrate how the ult works, you basically just line up yourself with some enemies and then you just activate the ult. You'll see that all these enemies will then be flying in the air and you're taking they're taking tons of damage. Now, they're taking water damage on top of it because there's some water effect already applied on them from the open world environment. You could cast fire into it, you could cast ice into it. No matter what you do, they will be taking an insane amount of damage. And as you saw, while these mobs are not very tanky, they basically just all died, and it kind of just helps you clear the field. It really controls these monsters, they get you off your back. It is an absolutely amazing ability, and you see from just casting that ability, I'm already half ready to cast it again. This gave me enough energy to cast this ability almost already. Now, if there was 5, 6, 7 monsters in there, the cooldown would have refreshed instantly, and I could cast it over and over again every 15 seconds, which is what creates such a powerful ability with Venti. Now, when we're talking about the abilities, I really recommend that you level up these abilities when you can. It takes the Book of Ballad, which you should be farming actively if you're using Venti, and I really recommend that you prioritize the ult first to level up, and then this one, and lastly, you can do this if you ever do auto attacks. If you don't even have to level this ability up at all. Now, lastly, if we look at the 2 additional abilities, now at Essential level 2, you'll reach this ability, which basically makes it so that when you cast your holding Skyward Sonnet, the wind tunnel that launches you in the air, the wind tunnel will stay for 20 seconds on the floor, so you can then switch characters and do what we showed you earlier in the video. And lastly, Storm Eye, you unlock this at Ascension level 4, so that's world level 35. When you unlock this, it is absolutely broken. It becomes even better than it already is. First of all, when you cast your ult, you regenerate 15 energy afterwards. It costs 60, so this is 25% full regeneration of the cost. Now, this is already insane because you're already regenerating a lot. And if elemental absorption occurred, so if you had another element in there, it says here specifically that any character that has the element in your party will get 15 energy. So if you launch Venti's ult into a fire on the floor and all the mobs take swirl and fire damage, that will make it so that your fire characters in your party gain 15 energy even if you haven't deployed them to cast the fire. So this is absolutely amazing because no matter what you do, you will be most likely using your own character's element or the element that are triggered from the world environment. And this will make it so that your entire party is gaining tons of energy. They can all cast their ult more often. The more they cast, the more energy they generate, the more they can cast again. This is insane. This ability makes Venti. As much as Venti is great before this level, this makes Venti one of the best support characters in the game by far. Now quickly, just to touch on Constellations. Of course, being a 5-star character, it is hard to get a lot of Constellation. Most free-to-play players will never really get any of those. But if you do manage to get some, the first Constellation here is actually pretty good. It means that when you do aim shots, you're going to have 2 additional arrows that do 33% of your damage. So it's kind of like a 66% damage increase on your aim shots. It's really good, but again, you're not really casting aim shots a lot as an archer because it takes so much time to charge up, and it's really just not easy to move and avoid damage when you're casting aim shot. It makes it really hard to play an archer, which is why most people play archers using auto attack damage, not aim shot damage. And in this case, this doesn't do anything for that, but it's still not bad. Now, if we go further in, there's a lot of stuff that will reduce the animal resistance of mobs when you cast your abilities, and it will just increase the level of some of your abilities. So it's all very good. Again, here you get more animal damage here, reduce the resistance here. This one increases the ability. And then the last one, again, reduces animal resistance of enemies. And it also reduces the animal resistance of every element that you use in your ult. So again, this becomes very powerful for a support party, but it will be very long before we get anywhere near 6 Constellations on Venti. What this does prove, though, is that the kit that Venti has in his Constellation is really, again, support-oriented, which makes this character really a good support. Now, going into the artifacts, there are quite a few sets that work very well with Venti. You, of course, can build a lot of attack statistic. You can go and have high attack so that you do high damage. But again, the ability that Ventis do are not so much trying to do damage as much as they are trying to CC and create swirl extra ability damage with your other elements. So going attack on him will be good. It's good to have attack on the pieces in order to do more damage, but it is also going to be very good to have stuff like elemental mastery as well as elemental damage if you do get swirl damage. So first, in the early game, the instructor set is probably one of the best sets you can use because it's, first of all, very easy to obtain and very cheap. Now, you'll have a lot of different pieces that have elemental mastery or attack on them, and that all works very well for Venti. Now, one thing to know is that when you are using elemental mastery, this means that the character that is casting the ability that triggers other elements will be applying its elemental mastery damage himself. Now, what that means is that if you go on Venti, cast the ult, and then immediately switch to someone else and then do ability damage, Venti's elemental mastery will be completely wasted and useless. Now, if you go on a fire character, create a fire, and then go on Venti, and then ult, triggering the fire and the swirl at the same time, now that will create the elemental mastery, and this is going to be Venti who casted the ult and triggering the elemental mastery for the damage. So in this situation, when you are using Venti and you are building elemental mastery, make sure that you are having elements already present when you switch to Venti to ult, and that you stay on Venti while the ult is being triggered so that the damage is triggered off of Venti's stats. Now, this set is absolutely amazing for that reason. Also, the fact that when you have the 4-piece, using your elemental skills will then increase your entire party's elemental mastery 420 for 8 seconds. Now, this is amazing because then you can use some abilities on Venti and then switch to another character and then do more element abilities, and then they will have boosted elemental mastery. So this is probably the best set for Venti for a very long time until you reach AR 35. Once you reach AR 35, there are 2 sets that become super good that you should start farming. The first one is from this area. In this artifact domain, you will see that as you reach AR 35, you will unlock this. And when you reach AR 40, you will unlock the orange version of these items. Now, this one, the Noblesse Oblige set, is probably one of the best sets that you can use on Venti specifically and on many other support characters. The reason being that, first of all, it gives elemental burst damage of 20%, which is incredibly high. 20% is a lot of damage. Now, of course, using elemental burst then increases all your party members' attack by 20% for 12 seconds. So this is going to be really good because when you're casting your ability, you're going to then switch to other characters. And if your characters are attack-based, which is usually the case, in my case with Diluc, for example, this will mean that Diluc's attack is increased by 20% for him casting and damaging the enemies stuck in Venti's ult, and this will trigger a very high amount of damage. Now, this is an absolutely great set because you're going to go on Venti and cast both elemental burst and ult all the time, and you're going to be triggering this all the time. Now, this is something that you can start farming, as I said, at AR 35, and you'll see that here the purple version starts dropping, and I would also recommend that you wait as long as possible because at 40 then you can start farming the orange version, which is the 5-star version, and this is going to be a very good set even for other characters. Now, you're going to try and roll some stuff on it that has obviously attack, and if you can get anemo damage, that will also probably work. Some of the pieces in there can get some anemo damage, so this could probably work well. There's also going to be elemental mastery that can be applied. Again, it is depending on how you use your Venti. Now, the other set that you can find is going to be here, the Valley of Remembrance. It is another place that drops artifact. Now, again, at 35 and at 40 is when it's recommended to start farming, because at 35 is when the Viridescent sets start dropping here. Now, this is the anemo damage bonus set. Again, this is going to be great because obviously you're doing a lot of anemo damage when you're using swirl effects with his abilities. Now, getting a 15% damage bonus on that is great. Now, here, increasing the swirl damage by 60% is absolutely amazing because the swirl damage basically duplicates the damage from your other elements, and it's just really good. This is a huge damage increase set, and it will also decrease the opponent's elemental resistance to the element infused by the swirl. So when you ult, every element that you cast in the ult will then have the mobs be debuffed on that element. So if you cast fire, electricity, and swirl, the enemy will have fire resistance, electricity resistance, and swirl resistance all reduced. This is absolutely amazing. This is probably better than the Noblesse Oblige in some cases. In the late game, this set and the Noblesse Oblige set will come very close, I think, in terms of stat boost and performance. There will be obviously high attack boost from the other set, as well as damage boost from the other set. But here, you're going to reducing the elemental resistance of enemies, which makes you do a lot more damage. Now, there is not a clear cut of which one is better yet, because it will depend on which character you're using and how geared your characters are and how much damage they're doing and all that stuff. There's going to be a point where elemental resistance is probably going to be better than just boosting attack, but there's also going to be some characters that probably boosting attack is going to be better than reducing elemental resistance. So it is going to depend, but I really think that this set is going to be the best in slot for Venti in the late game when you are very min-max in terms of stats. Now, if we go here, for example, this is the Anemo Hypothesis. This is the mob that will drop all the Ascension material that Venti needs to ascend himself, as well as it drops the Gladiator Finale, which is not good for Venti. But the Wondrous Troop is another set that is not terrible for Venti, especially if you are trying to build a damage Venti. Now, this charge attack damage, which is basically bow aim shot could be increased by 35%. Now, if you had a Constellation, you could build something with this set. It could be a set that we see in the future. Some builds could use that. Otherwise, the 2-piece bonus increases elemental mastery by 80. Now, you could get another 2-piece bonus that does elemental damage or more elemental mastery, and it could work well. And while you're leveling up, this is where you're going to find the Instructor and the Wanderer's Troop set. While you're killing these guys for the Ascension material, you're going to start having these sets. So this is going to be what you use and how you farm these sets before you get to level 35 or 40. Now, this loot table is the same for every single bosses around, so the electricity one as well drops the same kind of loot table, and same as the bosses such as Lupus, and same as the Storm Terror, and every other world bosses in the game will drop these sets, and it will be how you gear yourself in the beginning. Now, there is a lot of weapon that will work on Venti. First of all, this weapon, Amos Bow, obviously it's a 5-star and everybody can get it, has a attack percentage bonus here and base attack. So this will be good because you'll simply increase the attack statistic on Venti, which will make it trigger more damage. Now, it is a good weapon, but it is not the best weapon you can get because attack, as good of a stat as it is not going to be perfect for Venti because a lot of his element damage that Venti does is actually going to be triggered from other characters' elements. It's not only Venti that does the damage, it's really going to be the other characters that blend their elements with Venti. So one of the best, probably actually the best bow you can find for Venti is going to be the Stringless. Now, the Stringless has Elemental Mastery on it, so again, we are agreeing that Elemental Mastery is great on someone like Venti, but the real kicker here is here. The Elemental Skill damage and Elemental Burst damage increase by 24%. Now, the more you refine it, the higher this will go. This will create, by far, the best bow you can use on a support Venti, hands down, no matter what. Now, another option that people sometimes see is the Favonius Warbow. Now, the Favonius Warbow is a good bow. It has energy recharge by 40%, which is great. But Venti's ult already has absolutely no cooldown. It's incredibly easy to recharge. So this is kind of wasted on Venti. It doesn't do as much as people think it does because you really don't need energy recharge. You're already having your ult and your abilities up so often from just the kit itself that this is kind of wasted. Now, in terms of 3 stars, the Raven Bow is probably the best one because, again, you're going to have Elemental Mastery on it, and you'll have increased damage against enemies affected by Hydro or Pyro. Of course, if you have these in your party, which you probably will have at least one of them, this will help with the ability when it triggers these elements in the swirl effects. Now, when we're talking about other weapons, such as the crafted weapons or the Battle Pass weapon, those weapons are usually not that great on Venti. They have attack, crit rate, or physical damage. Again, it's like we talked earlier, there are going to be builds that work around that, but none of them are going to ever come close to being as good as the Stringless, Elemental Mastery, and Elemental Burst damage. It's going to be really hard to ever beat that. I don't think there's going to be a weapon that fits Venti more than this in a while. Now, if we go into the party setup for Venti, there is really going to be a hard press choice here to tell you which character goes well with Venti because literally any character goes well with Venti. Any electric, fire, ice, or hydro will trigger the swirl effect from his ult and will work well as long as you can cast that ability easily. Now, one other thing to note is that when you're using a party with 2 anemo characters, such as what I'm doing right now, you will see that the elemental resonance up here will give me decreased stamina consumption, increased movement speed, and shortened skill cooldown. Now, this is all great. In the Abyss, it's probably not the best because, I mean, it's good to help you avoid some damage, but it is going to be probably better to try and get more offensive or defensive abilities from your party. But in the open world, this is absolutely amazing. It lets you travel easier, climb longer, run longer. It just helps you your quality of life. And having Venti will help you climb stuff and fly to get Anemos and Geoculus, which will be a very useful bonus and a very useful perk. So guys, this is about it for my guide for Venti. Of course, Venti is probably one of the best support characters in this game by far, and the Abyss is probably his favorite place to be in because he will really help you there. Now, I recommend that you try Venti out and you see if you like the playstyle, and if you do, it's good to try and get him in the account. Not everybody's going to love the playstyle, and there's plenty of other support characters that do a very good job, including Sucrose, Jean, and the MC as Anemos will also do a very decent job at doing what Venti does. Now, if you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the comment. Any suggestions or idea for builds for Venti, I'm always listening and I'm always open to suggestion and making new guides if we discover new fun strategies. Make sure to check out Not Casual's Discord as well if you want to join and come talk with us about this game, about strategy, or simply join us on our live stream. We live stream every single day for this game, and we have guides for Genshin Impact coming out every single day as well. So hopefully you can like and subscribe and be part of our community and look out for these videos in the future and engage with us on them. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoy playing with Venti if you have him, and otherwise, I hope you're enjoying this game as much as we are. Hope to see you on the next video.